Hello and what's up everybody, it's Thunderbob here, and tonight we're going to be talking about the PlayStation VR2. I'm a big fan of VR. I got a Vive basically the month of release back in 2016. I've since upgraded to a Quest 2 and then a Quest 3, and I've been thinking of picking up a PlayStation VR for quite a while. But the limited number of exclusive titles really held me back. I really just wanted it to play Resident Evil and Gran Turismo in VR. I had been gifted a VR racing setup for Christmas, and I've been playing a bit of Gran Turismo on that. And I'll link below if you want to see my racing setup if you're interested in one. So I've been kind of keeping an eye out for PlayStation VR sales, and during Prime Day, I picked up a like new PlayStation VR2 for just under $200, which was too much of a deal to pass up. Like $200 for this really advanced VR headset. So after a few weeks of use, I've got some thoughts on the device, and I thought I'd go ahead and share them. First, let's go ahead and talk about the hardware itself. I'm going to compare the PlayStation VR 2 against the Quest 3, which is really my daily driver for virtual reality. And they're pretty similar in kind of the basic hardware. The PlayStation VR 2 has a 2000 by 2040 resolution per eye, which is very close to the Quest 3. There are some differences. The PlayStation VR 2 uses an OLED panel versus the LCD on the Quest. The headset also has Fresnel lenses as opposed to pancake lenses, which is what the Quest 3 uses. And we're going to talk about what all that means in practical terms here. So, uh, the OLED screen is a benefit in a lot of ways. So it makes the black levels and the very bright areas just look really spectacular. It produces a really bright image, and the dark areas look really good. An issue I've always had with the Quest headsets is the dark areas in some games look really kind of gray and smudgy. Saints and Sinners comes to mind. There's some areas that are just like pitch black and just really don't look very good on the Quest. And dark areas on the PlayStation VR generally look very good. Um, but the dark areas look really good. Like Resident Evil Village comes to mind, and the really dark, kind of spooky areas just look incredible in that game. There is some downside to the OLED panel, and that's something called the Mura effect. Basically, under certain kind of lighting conditions, certain game conditions, the screen kind of gets this washed out grainy effect. It kind of looks like a film grain almost, and it's based on imperfections in the OLED panel, from my understanding. And it seems like pretty much every panel is susceptible to this, and some have it worse than others. And it can be distracting. Like I noticed it only under very specific lighting conditions. So I've encountered it, and it was distracting, but your brain kind of forgets about it before long. So it's kind of like the choices here are like in some ways it's a plus, in some ways it's a minus. Like I feel like every headset kind of has that. Um, some other things, the Fresnel lenses that the PlayStation VR2 uses have some issues. So you'll get some God rays, like on a bright screen, you might see kind of like these like lines coming off of it. And there's also a small sweet spot on the PlayStation VR, which means like when you wear the headset, you really have to have your eyes just in the exact perfect spot to get a clear picture. But the Quest 3 has those pancake lenses. They are basically the whole screen is a sweet spot. You don't have to make sure that you're looking in a specific area to get a clear image. And let's kind of talk about how this thing fits on your head, because you really need to have it just perfect to get that sweet spot right, which is kind of part of the problem. I've got my PlayStation VR here, and I've also got my Quest 3. So let's talk about the Quest 3 to begin with. And I don't know how well this is going to come across, but um, the Quest 3 is essentially like straps to your head, and this is with the Elite strap, and you have it tight, and it's like you're wearing a pair of goggles essentially. Whereas the PlayStation VR, the one and two, have this mechanism that you wear it lower on the back of your skull, and like most of the weight is actually here, and then you're essentially just strapping this band to your head, and then the actual screen is just kind of floating in front of you, and you can adjust that. And you're tightening this, but you're not actually getting any direct contact. You're not really intended to have this like sitting on your nose or your face. There's kind of a gap there. And in more active games, I find that I, I feel like it's gonna fall off more than the Quest. On the Quest, it feels like it's strapped to my face. Like if I'm playing Beat Saber really aggressively, or I'm playing an action game, that Quest headset does not come off. Or the PlayStation VR feels a little bit more mobile, and because that sweet spot is small with the Fresnel lenses, I sometimes lose my sweet spot, and the image is then blurry. So it's like there's something that I like about it. I don't love the fit of the headset. It just doesn't feel quite right. Um, I'm not used to it. And this is with the Elite strap on the Quest and with just the standard on the PlayStation VR. I've heard that there are some mods out there, and I might explore that in the future. But just as a default, wearing it out of the box, it works, but it's not my favorite VR headset fit. And also gotta just say, like the headset feels a little cheap. Like it's big and bulky, and this just feels like this big hollow piece of plastic. And it's just huge. If I compare this to the Quest 3, um, I don't know how well this is gonna come across, but like the PlayStation VR is just immense compared to it. Like the Quest 3 feels like I'm wearing a pair of small ski goggles, and the PlayStation VR feels like I'm wearing an astronaut's helmet. So it's just it feels way bulkier, way larger. I don't like the fit as much. So uh, that could be improved in my opinion. The controllers also take some getting used to. They have like this huge ring on them, and it's kind of a unique design. And you essentially like weave your hand into it. The problem is when I have my headset on, I cannot just naturally like grab this. Like I'm grabbing it on the wrong. This is like what I'm doing. This isn't one of those like uh I'm not making that up. Like literally I'll have like the controller sitting on the ground and I've got the headset on. Unless I have the pass through turned on, I'm just like fumbling with it, and I can't put this stupid thing on. But when I actually get my hand into it, actually it's pretty great. Tracking is really good. uh it feels good. I love the adaptive triggers. It has the same thing like the PlayStation 5 standard DualSense has, where if I'm playing like Resident Evil, it'll give you where you have to press it a little harder to pull the trigger. It feels really cool. It's got good haptics, like good uh, vibration on this. And also, I didn't mention it, but the headset also has haptics and vibrates. And it's not used a lot, but when it is, it seems to be well utilized. One thing I don't like, and I'll pick up one of my Quest controllers, Quest 3 controller. The 2 had the ring on it, the Quest 3 does not. So if I'm playing like Beat Sabers and I'm weaving in and stuff, these bang into each other. This never does because it's like small enough that it's just sitting in my hand. Whereas this honkin' thing, let me put both of them on. Like if you bring your hands too close together, they tend to bang around. So um, I think the ring helps with tracking a little bit, but honestly, I've played like Beat Saber and a ton of action games with this, and never had a loss of tracking. So it feels like the controllers are a little bit of step down in that regard. But overall, like the actual adaptive triggers and the buttons all feel nice, the stick feels nice, everything, real responsive. Controller overall, I like the design. I don't love the ring and like just the difficulty putting it on because of the awkward positioning of the ring. One other unique hardware feature I wanted to talk about is eye tracking, which is really pretty advanced. Like, not a lot of headsets use eye tracking, and it's primarily used for two things here. For foveated rendering, that's basically where the headset will push pixels where your eyes are looking. So there's a camera that's looking at your eyeballs and where you're looking. And if you're looking in the top left, it's going to put a higher resolution and more pixels in that spot. And it will allow the system to run games that just natively would not be possible. Like the Resident Evil games look great. Call of the Mountain looks amazing. And those really would not be possible without, I think, that foveated rendering. The other thing I've seen it used for is like in Horizon Call of the Mountain, in the menus, you can actually move the cursor, like move what you're selecting just by looking, and it feels like magic. It's hard to explain until you actually try it out. And I think it's used for some targeting. I haven't really dug deep into it, but I could just imagine the ways this could be used, like, um, you know, aiming in a game like Rez. Like I played Rez years ago in VR on, I think it was the Vive, and just imagine being able to play that game, but just look with your eyeballs and do the targeting. Or like a cockpit game, like maybe you're doing a mech game and like you're physically doing dials and stuff, but like just where you're looking is where the game is targeting. And I think that would just feel amazing and play amazing. But from what I've seen, it hasn't been widely used yet. So it's very cool and forward thinking technology that again just isn't super well utilized. And the last piece of hardware stuff I want to mention is the cord. I have not played a VR system with a cord in ages. Like I had the Vive wireless adapter since like 2018 or 19, whenever it came out, and I have not gone back to a wired VR headset since. I play both the Quests, and I play native games, and then I also do PC VR using virtual desktop. So even when I'm playing my PC VR stuff, I'm playing that wirelessly generally. And I think it's come enough with my Wi-Fi 6 router that I don't lose too much image. It's a little compressed, but to me, having the freedom, I've got like a fairly big play space here, having the freedom to just walk around in this, I've got about a 15 by 20 play space when I move stuff out of the way. Being able to just freely walk around and move and jump, and it is such a hindrance to be back on the cord. And what it really means is the PlayStation VR is primarily just going to be for exclusives. You know, the Resident Evil, the Horizon games. I want to pick up like Synapse, and there's a couple other exclusives. There's not a lot. Um, Gran Turismo. I'm primarily just going to play those games on the PlayStation. I'm going to keep Quest as my daily main VR headset for PC VR and for Quest exclusives. And then the PlayStation VR is primarily just for the games that are only available there. So let's actually talk about the games. I bought the PlayStation VR essentially just for a couple of exclusive games. And that's really, whenever I buy a piece of hardware, the hardware is important, the controller is important, that it actually works. But then, I'm buying this primarily to play games on it. And there's only a handful of exclusives on the PlayStation VR2, unfortunately. I bought the Quest 3, and that system has just so many exclusives because Meta really has invested in VR. For all of their problems, they put a lot of money into the industry. And then PC VR, maybe not has quite as many exclusives, but it usually has the best version, like the best looking or the most moddable. And there's also in the PC area, you got a lot of mods for non-VR games, things that just are not possible to play anywhere else other than modding them on PC. So now I come back around to the PlayStation VR, and there's really like the two Resident Evil games, Gran Turismo, Synapse, Horizon, maybe 5 to 10 games that cannot be had elsewhere. So, I jumped in, and the first thing I noticed when I started playing is how many of the PlayStation VR games rely on reprojection. This is where the system will cut the frame rate in half and duplicate frames. So the headset will run at 60 FPS and then duplicate it to hit the 120 hertz of the monitors in the headset. I've mostly tried to avoid reprojection as it causes kind of double image at times, and honestly, it gives me a bit of a headache, and it can be noticeable and distracting. I found in some games it was worse than others. Gran Turismo, I found it not to be an issue as you're mostly just looking ahead. You don't get that double image. In other games like Resident Evil, it's a lot more noticeable, especially like the easiest way is just take your hand, put it in front of you, and move it like this, and you'll just see the trail of your hand. And that's the easiest way in most games for me to tell if reprojection is enabled. It can also just tell you that the frame rate's real low, but usually it means reprojection's running. And on the PC side of things, on the Quest, it's not utilized as much, I find. And you can usually adjust settings to turn it off. Even if you have to lower graphics, sometimes I'll do that to get reprojection to be turned off. I wish it wasn't required, but a lot of these games are very advanced, and I feel like they probably wouldn't run at native resolution. So reprojection is probably required for a lot of these games. I mean, they're not quite like Half-Life Alyx at maximum settings, or like some of the very high-end PC VR games, but some of those games to run well, you need like a 4090 or 5090, and the PlayStation 5 just simply is not that powerful. And it's kind of amazing what they're doing with the base hardware, but it's still, I wish they didn't have to rely as much on reprojection. Now, I want to go through, I'm just going to do like a mini 60-second, 2-minute review for all of the games I've played so far. And I've spent the most time with the Resident Evil games, and Resident Evil Village in particular. I get through like a third of the game literally in my first sitting with the PlayStation VR2. I just did not want to stop playing. I replayed through the entire Resident Evil franchise over the last 3 months. I've got videos for each of those if you're interested. So this was fresh in my mind. So I played it outside of VR, played it inside of VR, and I have to say, they nearly perfectly translated this game to VR. There are a few noticeable differences. The resolution's a bit lower, the lighting's simplified, there's no ray tracing, but it really is the same game in virtual reality. And Village was originally a first-person game, and I think that the VR version benefits from this because there are a lot of like animations and actions that work well and translate directly into VR. The cinematics were also largely in the first person, and you get the option of doing them in first person or watching like a virtual screen in front of you. The only issue I had was sometimes I would become desynced, so I'm watching the cinematic, and next to me is like the disembodied body of Ethan floating next to me. It just feels really weird. There's also some annoying moments where there's enemies that will like grab you and take you down to the ground. That can be disorienting. Otherwise, the gameplay translates really great. The scares are amped up even more with the intimacy of VR. So Resident Evil Village, definitely can recommend it if you got a PlayStation VR2. The next game I put some time into was Resident Evil 4. Very similar situation. I think the graphics even look a little bit better in 4, though the performance feels a little less consistent. I played the Quest 3 version, which is built on the original 2005 game, and while I like the gameplay better there, this game just looks incredible. The only real issue to note was Resident Evil 4 was originally a third-person game, so some of the actions don't translate as well into VR. Like, Village felt a little more natural, both in the gameplay and in the actions. Like, in 4, all of the cinematics are those virtual screens. There's no way to actually, like, experience the cinematics, which they weren't that great anyways in Village. And anything with the gunplay just feels a bit smoother in 4, I would say. Like, there are fewer enemies that would pull you to the ground or disorient you like there were in Village. It's a bit less scary, a bit less atmospheric probably than Village, but the actual gameplay and combat I think is better in 4. And yeah, I really enjoyed Resident Evil 4. The next game I played a lot of was Gran Turismo 7, which I've had a racing wheel, so I've been playing this game off and on since Christmas. I'm like halfway through the menu books. And I'll link below if you're interested of my setup. I've got a stand and a Logitech wheel. And this is a blast. Playing it in VR is incredible. Driving around a corner and like you're looking over as you're going around the corner and watching the guy next to you. It just feels so immersive. I'm probably worse at driving in VR, but it feels just so cool. And the reprojection is less noticeable, and being tethered really doesn't matter because you're just sitting in a chair. That cord doesn't really come into play at all. I don't know if this will be the main way that I engage with the game, but it's just a really fun experience and a great way to demo VR to newbies. So if they want to play a game and don't want to walk around, you can have them sit down in one spot. Though racing games can be one of the things that can cause nausea, so you got to watch out for that. Next up was Horizon Call of the Mountain. I played both of the Horizon games before. And I like them, but I don't love them. Like, they're fine. Um, I usually end up mainlining and skipping a lot of the side content because I just think it's a little bloated. But the VR game here, I was pretty pleasantly surprised. It just looks incredible. One of the best looking VR games I've ever seen, and the size and the scale of all the enemies really translates well into VR. The enemies in the game are just massive and towering over you, and the world just looks amazing and it feels like you're an avatar, something like that. The gameplay is mostly navigating the world by climbing, swinging, and simple platforming, and then there's some simple combat using your bow and other tools. It mostly feels on rails, like you're on a Disney ride or something, just going kind of like from one trail to the next trail. It's not super deep, but it's been a fun experience. I would really love if they could translate the full game into VR. Like, I don't know if that'd be possible. Probably have to downgrade some things. But if they could just take that traditional Horizon experience, I think that could be so fun running around in VR. Yeah, but this one definitely worth checking out. I also picked up Five Nights at Freddy's, which I don't think is exclusive, but it's a sit-down game for the most part, and it works well with the cord. It's mostly just you sitting in front of like a bank of monitors, so the cord's not an issue. But the game looks really good and legitimately is pretty scary at times. I was making so much noise when I was playing during the jump scares, I was worried about waking up the rest of my household. So I enjoyed it. If you're a fan of those games, the first one, I think it was basically like redone. It was a PlayStation VR1 game, and then they remade it for VR2 and like improved the graphics and added some stuff. And then there's a sequel to that that is exclusive on the VR2, which I haven't played yet. I own it, but I haven't booted it up yet. But the first one I played a couple hours of, and me and my daughter have both enjoyed it. So final thoughts on the PlayStation VR2. Overall, I'm impressed with the system, but it's not without some issues. The cord is really a deal breaker for me on more action-oriented and non-exclusive games. The reliance on reprojection is annoying, but understandable with how good some of the games look. And the Mura effect can be distracting depending on how bad it is on your headset and the specific game you're playing. I do really like how easy everything this is to set up, and I like the controllers once I get them on, and the haptics, the eye tracking is potentially game-changing. The OLED screen produces some really great visuals. Overall, it's kind of like a one step forward, one step back kind of thing. It has some very forward-thinking and advanced features, like the eye tracking, that are held back by things like the lack of wireless support. The other elephant in the room is that Sony seems to have mostly abandoned the system. There might not be many new exclusive games. Sony, I think right now has no unreleased but announced exclusive Sony titles for this thing, which is crazy. So in the end, is this worth buying today? And that really depends on a few factors. First, do you already have a PlayStation 5 or a gaming PC? If you already have the PlayStation 5, that makes the barrier to entry way easier to swallow. So should you buy this if you already have the PlayStation 5? Well, the PlayStation VR was released at $600, and for that price, I would say probably not. It's just, there's not enough exclusive games for that price. The MSRP today is like $400, and it comes down on occasion. And I would say it depends at that price on how interested you are on the exclusive titles. And if you have a PC, which opens up other options for you. If you can get it on a big sale like I did, if you can get this thing for like $200, I think it's a no-brainer. Even as just a machine to play Gran Turismo and Resident Evil, at that price, I think it's worth the price of entry, essentially. So that's where I'm at. I'm enjoying it. It's not going to replace my Quest 3, but for the exclusive titles on the PlayStation VR, I've definitely enjoyed my time with it. And I do plan on actually beating all the titles. And maybe I'll do a review on those after I beat them. So I'm going to end it there. I do want to appreciate, thank you for watching. If you enjoy this, like, subscribe, drop me a comment with any thoughts, and just good night, everybody.